All right, everyone, let's take a look at the top 20 fantasy players over the last 2 weeks. This is done on a per game basis, as always. Again, looking at those last 2 weeks of action. The number one player over the last 2 weeks is, of course, Anthony Davis of the New Orleans Pelicans, averaging 26.5, 12, and 5, with 3.5 blocks and almost 2 steals. The percentages are back up, and he is back in his rightful position as the number one fantasy guy over this 2 week period. Look, this is just who Anthony Davis is, pretty much. And the thing is, in this time, he's shooting just 28% from three. So that's a number that can pretty comfortably come up. He's a much better shooter than that in general. But yeah, otherwise, this is just what Anthony Davis does. Jimmy Harden is your number two ranked player, averaging 36.5 and 9.5 with 2 steals on 48 and 86. And much like Davis, this is just who Harden is, and I'd be pretty stunned if these two guys aren't the number one and number two fantasy players for the rest of the season, or when the season actually does end. Big numbers from those guys so far this season, pretty much in line with what we expected. The number three player is Kevin Durant. Some of that is fueled by the time he had without Steph Curry. 32-point average, 7.5 rebounds and assists with a steal, with a block, and 2.5 threes, shooting 52 and 38 from the field and from three-point land. He's going to hover in that 3 to 6 type zone, I would imagine. I think that the playoff rest stuff is overblown with Warriors players. Durant's just going to be in that solid top area, while the fun guy, Kawhi Leonard, comes in at number 4, averaging 38 minutes a game, 29 points, 8 rebounds, over 2 steals, over a block, 2.5 threes on elite percentages. I talked about it in the preseason, and I thought he had a significant chance to be a top 5 player. He isn't that over the course of the season, but this is just an indication of what he can be, and nothing here looks really fluky. Yeah, 51 and 89 are high percentages, and 44% from 3 is high. It's not that high for a guy like Leonard, who is very efficient. 29 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, and a block. Nothing outrageous there with what Leonard's doing. He could remain a top 5 player for the rest of the season. And the minutes are sky high, something which we did anticipate coming across from San Antonio. The number 5 player over the last 2 weeks is Steph Curry. Only played the 4 games, 34 minutes a night, 30 points with 5.5 triples. That is insane. 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and 1.3 steals, and his usual stupid efficiency, 51, 96, and 52% from deep. Just nonsense type numbers from Steph Curry. And that top 5 is a pretty good representation of what I think the top 5 has a chance to be at the end of the season. Maybe someone like Yanni or Karl Anthony Towns can jump into that mix. But if that was the top 5 at the end of the season, I don't think too many people would be shocked. This is where it starts to go a little bit weird. Damian Lillard comes in at number 6. Averaging 30 points with 7 assists and 4 triples with 1.2 steals, shooting 48%. Now, one of the biggest concerns with Lillard's game from fantasy is that low field goal percentage, which is really up over the last 6 games. He is also a pretty low steals guy, and averaging 1.2 over the last 6 games elevates him slightly, but it's not outrageous. He's a guy who's probably a 9 to 12 type fantasy guy, who's just marginally up at the moment, while Giannis Antetokounmpo is the 7th ranked player, averaging 24, 14, and 6.5 assists, with 1.5 steals and 1.7 blocks on a fantastic 57% from the field. And his free throws have actually improved, but he takes so many of them that 72.5%, which is what he's shooting over the last 6 games, 8.5 attempts, that actually makes you a significant negative. In fact, the Z score for that category is over -1, which is pretty large in terms of, guys in that top 12 discussion. In terms of the biggest negative impact that category has, it's the 4th highest negative impact. The 2 highest negative impacts are Russell Westbrook's field goal percentage and his free throw percentage, and the next 2 big negative impacts are Giannis Antetokounmpo's threes and free throw percentage. So for those of you wondering, Giannis should be 2, he should be 3, the reason is he's got 2 really big negative categories in his overall production. Same with Russell Westbrook at number 8, who is averaging 22, 13, and 12 with 2 steals. That's fantastic. He's hitting 2 threes a game over his last 5, shooting 46% from the field. That's pretty solid for Westbrook. Sorry, I said Westbrook's field goal percentage. I mean his block numbers are one of the biggest negatives because he hasn't had a single block in 5 games. But 65% from Russ on 4 free throw attempts. At this point, we just have to think that Russell Westbrook is pretty close to being a punt free throw guy. Now, a negative 1.3 standard score is not unrecoverable from. In fact, if you had Kevin Durant on your team during this same time, he was a 3.51, so you're already in significant positive territory in that category. But it's obviously not a good start to have Westbrook and his poor free throw percentage, which has lasted for 2 seasons now, and I'm not really sure why it's been as bad as it has been. The next couple of guys are probably two big surprise players in the top 10. Number 9 is Drew Holiday, averaging 37.5 minutes for almost 24 points, 4.5 rebounds, 8.3 assists, which is pretty bloody good for a guy who isn't a point guard. 1.9 steals and zero point 0.8 blocks on 53 and 80, including 39% from three. Now, his free throws and three-point percentage had been down this season, but they're starting to trend back in the right direction. 80% over the last 8 games, 39 from three over the last 8 games. The legendary field goal percentage is there. High blocks, high steals, high assists, good scoring. He has been an absolute monster this season and really putting together good numbers. Bob Covington is the number 10 ranked player, 36 minutes a night, averaging 18.5 points. Now, this is one that's prime for regression because he's shooting 56% from the field. This is a low 40s percentage guy normally, 86 from the line, 43 from three. So there's room for that to drop. But 7.5 rebounds is fine, 2.6 triples is fine, 2.2 steals is normal, 1.2 blocks is normal. So all of that from Covington is relatively sustainable. It's just that 56% shooting and 43% from three is unlikely to continue from him unless something's just really clicked in Minnesota and now he becomes a very good shooter. He's always been a dangerous shooter, but a fluky, streaky, low percentage guy. But at the moment, that's clearly not the case as he's putting up career highs in field goal percentage and three-point percentage so far this season. We've also seen a massive uptick in his free throw attempt rate for a guy who shoots as well as he does. Last season, he got to the line 1.7 times per game. This year is at 2.2, but importantly, over the last 5, 4.4 free throw attempts per game. That is a massive increase to his value, and that's part of the reason he's here. His teammate comes in at number 11, Karl Anthony Towns, 22.5 and 10.5 with 1.7 steals and 1.7 blocks. And the only thing keeping him from a top 5 spot here is the fact that he's down at 48% from the field. If he was back at that 56 number that we've seen from him through his early part of his career, then he'd be very much right up the top there. He's still shooting 42% from three. It's just those 2-pointers aren't at the elite level they were before. The difference between him being the 12th best player and the 3rd best player are blocks. Really is realistically over the course of the season. 1.7 over the last 6 is impressive, but there was a 6-block game in there, so that skews those results a little bit. Paulie George is your 12th ranked player, averaging 24, 8, and 4.5 with almost 3 triples and 1.6 steals. He's been up and down with his efficiency this season, and the production's dipped a bit with Westbrook back, but 48 and 85 are nice efficiency numbers, and still cranking out the 4.5 assists, which is something that I thought would drop more significantly than what it has with Westbrook back in the lineup. But George is going to hover in this 12 to 16-ish type of range, I would imagine. A couple of guys coming up next who are pretty surprising. Al Horford, the 13th ranked player, averaging 18 and 6 with a steal, 2 blocks, and 61% shooting. So it's the 2 blocks and the 61% shooting that have Horford going from a guy who's probably a 45 to 65 type of a guy up into number 13. That's just how big of a jump those two positive categories give him. And then, of course, when your field goal percentage goes up, your scoring goes up. So that 18 points over his last 3 games, and he's missed some time, is not realistic to continue. While De'Aaron Fox at number 14 also a surprise. 19, 2, and 8 looks great. 2.2 steals and 0.8 blocks are huge reasons why he's up here. And 49% from the field, including 46% from three. Now, those numbers are unrealistic for Fox to continue. I think it was only last week that I was talking about him as a potential buy low guy because his field goal percentage has plummeted to like 37%. All this should do is give you an indication that he's quite streaky and he can be perhaps a buy low guy when it falls off, or a real sell high guy. If someone wants to buy him as a top 20 player, I'd sell the shit out of that, and I'd be happy to palm him off for as impressive as he's been. That sort of shooting I don't think sticks. The 15th ranked guy is Nikola Vucevic of the Orlando Magic. Just keeps chugging away. I don't think he's getting traded this season. 32 minutes, 23 and 12 with over 4 assists. Lack of defense here, half a steal and half a block, but that 56%, which is significantly up on what he's done really at any point in his career. Yeah, being able to maintain that high of a field goal percentage while still taking 4 threes a game and hitting 42% of them has been a massive part of his fantasy evolution to become this top 20 player. I think top 15 is probably unrealistic for Vooch, but I was thinking maybe he dropped outside the top 30. I don't really think that's going to happen anymore for Vooch, so really impressive stuff. Jimmy Butler is your 16th ranked player, averaging 23, 6, and 3 with 1.8 steals. So it's good to see him back here without averaging 2.5 steals. those numbers are very realistic for Butler. 47, 92, and 32% from three. Nothing off about that at all. I think you should be looking at him as a pretty solid top 25 player the rest of the way, while Kyrie Irving also is solid at number 17. 22, 4, and 7 with a steal on 53 and 75. Maybe the field goal percentage dips, maybe the free throw percentage rises. This is about the right range for Irving. Number 18, Bradley Beal, 26 points with 2 triples, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists. The blocks still remain really high, 0.7 blocks, and he is at career high numbers for blocking shots this season, taking a cue from his teammate Johnny Wall. Elite efficiency, 51 and 82 for a true shooting of 60%. He is, I think, probably more of a 20 to 25 guy rather than top 20, but we're really nitpicking there. Number 19 is Nikola Jokic, who's averaging 17, 9, and 9 with 1.3 steals. The reason that he is not a top 10 player is because over the last 6 games, he's shooting 17% from 3 and 46% from the field. This is a guy who should be mid to high 50s in field goal percentage and mid to high 30s in three-point percentage. Those two numbers come back up. His scoring goes up, his threes go up, and he's a comfortable top 10 guy. So if you can buy him for, I would very easily trade Vucevic to get Jokic, or anyone in this sort of a range. If I'm trading Bradley Beal to get Jokic, it's pretty straightforward to me. I think that those numbers are going to come back up for Jokic. And the 20th ranked player is LeBron James, averaging 28, 7, and 6.5 with 1.4 steals. Why is he down this far? Well, he's shooting 65% from the line on 7 attempts, which is the single largest negative categorical impact over the top 20 players at a negative 2.2 in terms of standard score. The next highest negative contribution is Russell Westbrook's free throw percentage as well, which is only a negative 1.29. So it just shows you the difference. Both guys, LeBron shooting 65.3, Westbrook shooting 65.0. So on the surface, you'd look at that and go, that's equivalent. It's not, because LeBron's taking an additional 3 attempts per game, and that is how big of an impact that has on overall fantasy value. So don't be fooled just by the number. Attempts make such a big impact, and that 7 versus 4 attempts is basically the difference why Westbrook's 8 and LeBron is number 20. So that does it for the top 20 players over the last 2 weeks for fantasy basketball.